FBI Director Christopher Wray went to Capitol Hill Monday to answer lawmakers' questions about last week's watchdog report into the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Joining Wray under oath was Justice Department Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who conducted the probe into the FBI's investigation. Horowitz was grilled about whether the agency's probe was clouded by politics.
We found the implication that senior FBI employees would be willing to take official action to impact a presidential candidate's electoral prospects to be deeply troubling and antithetical to the core values of the FBI and the Justice Department. With regard to the decision to close the investigation without prosecution, we found no evidence that the conclusions by the prosecutors were the result of improper considerations, including political bias, but rather were exercises of prosecutorial discretion by the prosecutors based on their assessment of the facts, the law, and past department practice.
Joining me now is former FBI Assistant Director and CBS News security analyst Ron Hosko. Ron, thanks for being here. First of all, what did you take away from this hearing?
Well, a couple things, Elaine. One, I thought that not only the report, but the Inspector General's description of the report and the processes was very thorough. I don't think that any of the senators had laid any fault at the feet of the Inspector General. He seemed to have followed normal investigative and timeline processes. I thought that both he and the FBI director were very circumspect in their responses. Certainly some of the senators had questions that tried to lay a bit of a political trap. In most cases, those traps were obvious, where they're trying to pull the Inspector General or the director into commentary that was outside of the bounds of this report. They did not fall into those traps. And I think they both, particularly the director, took the findings of this report very, very seriously.
Well, what are your biggest questions remaining?
You know, Elaine, I think the report covered a lot of this. Look, it is antithetical to the FBI's integrity, the expectations of the workforce, to let your personal political views get involved or intersect with a case, your investigative work. And I think there are some additional questions that ought to be asked, certainly when Peter Strzok becomes available as a witness, or perhaps the deputy director or Lisa Page, the people who were really most prominent in these text messages. I think it would be great if Congress summoned them and asked them hard questions about how they could let this happen, how they could be involved with it, and what they did beyond just texting back and forth about their political views. So I don't think that chapter is entirely closed. I do think that, of course, the White House wants to use this report in a way that says, look, this acquits us of any Russia collusion. It does not. It really didn't address that. But B, I think there are some legitimate questions about Strzok's involvement in the Russia investigation in its infancy. I'm sure Bob Mueller has already covered this, but I think it would be good to kind of get it out in the public domain so that the air is clear.
Well, the Inspector General's report did not focus on Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into the 2016 election, but that didn't stop senators from bringing it up anyway. I want to get your reaction to Wray and Horowitz's answers.
Okay.
Do you have any reason to believe that this investigation has been discredited?
Senator, as I said to you last month, and as I said before, I do not believe Special Counsel Mueller is on a witch hunt.
The same group of people that led the Clinton email investigation were leading the Russian investigation until at least such time as Director Mueller, the special counsel, terminated their services because of the appearance of conflict of interest. Do you share those concerns?
I share the concerns, and we wrote, in fact, here that it did cast a cloud over the entire Clinton email investigation.
So we have Wray countering the president's claim that the special counsel investigation is a witch hunt, and Horowitz saying he shares Senator Cornyn's concerns about a conflict of interest. Can both of those things be true, Ron?
Well, I think so. First, you know, what these text messages represent is very concerning, and particularly when you're talking about somebody, Peter Strzok, who was the Deputy Assistant Director of the Counterintelligence Division and was very closely tied to both of these investigations. There was some documentation of the gap in time between the FBI's discovery of Clinton emails on Huma Abedin's devices and her husband, Weiner, his laptop. There was a delay in the period of time between when the FBI discovered that and when they really pressed for legal process to get in and extract all those, leading up to the Director Comey's commentary in late October. And so Strzok was involved in both investigations at the time, and there's some supposition that he was pressing forward on the Russia investigation and, in a sense, ignoring these emails and the laptop that needed to be exploited. Was he doing that with a particular purpose, with a bias in mind? So, look, I think it behooves those of us who want to be informed to read this Inspector General's report, to keep paying attention to these issues. Strzok's activities do create a cloud. He was involved at the beginning of the Russia investigation. Testimony of the Inspector General was that when Bob Mueller was made aware of these texts last summer, he very quickly terminated Strzok from that investigation. I'm very confident Bob Mueller has looked over everything Strzok did and touched and has vetted that with other agents, with other investigative work. And so that cloud ought to be cleared. But there are some of these senators who want an investigation of the investigation now, which will, of course, only slow it down.
Well, I want to play another clip from DOJ Inspector General Horowitz, where he confirms that his office is investigating James Comey's personal memos from his time as FBI Director.
Are you investigating Comey's handling of his memos? And does that include the classification issues? And should Mr. Comey expect a report when it is complete?
We received a referral on that from the FBI. We are handling that referral, and we will issue a report when the matter is complete.
What might be learned, Ron, from that investigation? Is it possible that Comey could face prosecution?
Elaine, my experience with Jim Comey tells me that Jim Comey is a pretty darn smart guy. He was a savvy and successful prosecutor in his time, and in many ways he was a very successful FBI director until his termination. However, this report has already raised judgment issues about Jim Comey in the form of possible insubordination in going out with his July press conference and the later release and discussion back and forth with Congress in October. So there's been some serious questions raised about Jim Comey's judgment, and I think they will be raised again in how he believed that those memos were somehow personal property that he could navigate with. I suspect that the Inspector General will challenge that very strongly. He was the FBI director at the time that those memos were created. I believe they were created on an FBI laptop, at least one of them, perhaps more. I think Jim Comey's smart enough not to put classified in that sort of informal memo. Time will tell. It's been reported that what he released to his friend to get to the New York Times was not classified. I hope for his sake it was not, but I think he'll be criticized for it. I don't think those were his personal property when he was the FBI director creating them on FBI devices. So I think he'll face some serious criticism again.
All right, Ron Hosko in Washington for us. Ron, thanks very much for your insight.
Sure.